Welcome to PhD with Women on IT Hack the Future. My name is Beata Young, and today's PhD Positivity Hack delivered will be by our guest, Alec Watson. Today's topic: how to define your visual identity. PhD episode 33 starts here. Let me remind you, this is a grassroots community that focuses on the women on IT, an inclusive forum of women in technology, startups, female leaders who are supported by men as well. And I bring heart to that hustle because empathy is my mojo. And empathy is critical when you are defining your visual identity. In today's episode, we are going to learn from expert. And did you know that we interpret images 30 to 60,000 times faster than we can read? Great visual branding is the cornerstone of a successful brand story for big brands and small ones. Stay for the discussion and be able to align your visual messaging so that your small or big business can truly compete with anybody. Our guest, best known for his advertising work, Alec Watson, is a multidisciplinary digital media artist. As a photographer, his work has graced magazine covers, movie posters, album covers, and a multitude of advertising from Coca-Cola and Starbucks to heads of states. As director of photography, Alec has filmed advertising for Starbucks, Britney Spears, Free Britney, Goldwell, KMS, Microsoft, Sexy Hair. Beyond the advertising realm, Alec has directed and filmed music videos and several award-winning short films. A triple threat in digital media, Alec started as a recording engineer and earned platinum and gold records for music production, songwriting, keyboards, and backing vocals. Alec was also nominated for an Leo for film composition. Leo, I just learned, is that best Alec, you've got to help me because we just defined what it was and I completely forgot.
It's like a Canadian Oscar that was for film composition.
Fantastic. And here is our Leo, Alec Watson, who is joining us from.
I live on Vancouver Island on the west coast of Canada in a little town looking back across the water towards Vancouver, and that's home for me. Thanks for a wonderful introduction. I was getting red in the face here. I'm not used to talking about myself or hearing other people talk about me. So I guess when you get old enough and you work hard and you love what you do, you rack up a list of things. So very happy to be here.
Well, Alec, I have to say that I had to cut through some of your achievements because there are so many of them. I just focus on the biggest names I could get, including our favorite star, which is
Britney.
Yes, absolutely.
There's always a lot of mileage.
This one.
There's always a lot of mileage out of having worked with Britney. For me, the first time that I heard that was even going to happen, I think it was in New York on a shoot, and a text came in, and it was just like, "Are you available this date to work with Britney Spears?" And I was just like, "What?" And I gotta say, right off the top, I was like, "Wow, can I do that?" I actually, it's ironic. I suffer, and it's been my whole life. I suffer from imposter syndrome. And so I don't know if you experience that, or, I hear that it's a lot more common than we think it is. When I worked in music, I never actually had piano lessons, and I was a keyboard player for some bigger touring acts. And I always felt like I was cheating. I always felt like, man, if people knew that all the stuff that I didn't know. And it was like concentrating on how empty the glass was of my talent. And I guess it's that voice inside your head. And so, yeah, the imposter syndrome, it's followed me around my whole life. And it's just like, really? That's going to happen to me? So I shot a campaign. I shot a few campaigns with Britney, and interestingly, at the time, it was Britney's lingerie campaign, which made it even more unusual. She wasn't particularly known for her lingerie at the time, and so one of the things that we had to do with that, for me, I was director of photography, which means I am in charge of the filming of it. But on a campaign like that, it's a very big team, and you have a lot of people involved. So there were people on set design, producers who are putting all the elements together, and everybody's kind of working as a team, and you've got your components. So mine was very much, it's just like, okay, I have to film it in a way that looks beautiful. For me, I think when we think about Brittany, and this goes with branding, we always want to be thinking about the story that we've got to tell. And the obvious story with Brittany would be maybe like superstar, or um, she grew up as kind of she grew up honestly being like a sex symbol. And the brief that I got when we sit down, the brief meeting is when we sit down and we talk about all this stuff. That was not the feeling. That they wanted to go with something that was beautiful, and that was not really what I would identify with Britney at the time. And so we kind of had to rework all that. And I got to say, if I got an accomplishment out of working with her on that, it was when they interviewed her um, about the shoot on Entertainment Tonight. She said, "Oh, I just finished the shoot, and I got to say, it was the most beautiful shoot I've ever done in my life." And I was just like, "Wow, thank you." And that was my great moment out of the Britney Spears shoot.
That was your Leo moment.
Yes, it
Fantastic.
was. It was.
Well, has got quite a I would say a fluctuation of her brand identity, right? So
Absolutely,
she had
yes.
this moment, and these are these stages of life that sometimes we actually had this question on the first PhD episode with Dr. Amina, who was talking about how to tackle the fear. And somebody was asking, the question from the audience was, how do I deal with the fact that last year I was silly and I posted silly stuff, and now I can't really face it? So I think with Britney, there is a moment in her life when she really struggled, and like everyone at certain stage of our life, think back and think, "Whoa, I just want to wipe this off,"
Yeah,
but it's
yes,
impossible, right? Because
that's
there
right.
is so much of it
Yeah,
online.
it's I think it's a lot harder time to start out than when I started out. I I of course made all sorts of mistakes in my life, and they're not recorded on a camera and they're not sitting somewhere on a hard drive somewhere. I worked initially as a teen, like my late teens. I ended up in a music act that had some top 40s. And so we went on tour, and I ended up in Nashville. And along the way, I made friends with management companies and people who would basically spin stories. And sadly, okay, gosh, I didn't know I was going here, but as you brought this question up, because I think it's relevant. Sadly, back at the time, especially in country music, so we're talking about the '90s. Um, it would not have been considered in your best interests to let people know whether you were gay or not. And probably, you know what, that's true for everybody, or for most people in music at the time. Like if I think about like Ricky Martin, who has come out now, but back then, absolutely not. And so I guess we've had positive change as well. And I think back to then, and how they would spin things and stories and things that would go wrong for artists who made mistakes, and they would spin the story. Today it's very different. And I think it's awesome that we're much more allowed to be who we want to be, whether that's sexual orientation, who you identify as. But it's got to be really difficult knowing that when you do make mistakes, they're a whole different brand of mistakes and they're being recorded. I think this is probably especially difficult for anybody who is self-branding. And I work with I work with everybody from corporations to self-brand, and self-branding's got to be the absolute toughest one. And I think you've got to make the decision early on whether when you're self-branding, it's like how would I put it? When I think about the musicians that I work with, some of them have a switch that they will flick on, and that switch is their performer switch. And so they have a larger than life persona, which may or may not be them. And then they've got their persona that's at home. Then there's other performers who it's just like this is authentically who they are. And I think that's got to be the toughest one because you don't have that protection. And I don't know if you've noticed, people tend to be kind of mean on on
Mm.
the internet. They might not be in person, but man, the internet and looking at reviews, I think it's got to be a really incredibly tough time uh, to be a young person who is putting themselves out there in business and has got to put their story out in an authentic way because it's so hard to not make a mistake. Like that would be crippling, I think.
Mm. Well, I wanted to mention our friend here who just joined us and said, "Hello, Beata Young. Hello, Kasia. It's lovely to see you." She's definitely somebody who is not afraid to show her vulnerabilities, her hard times and good times and bad times. She even posted, which I think it's very brave because I only posted my bruises, like when I fell down with only a couple of people on WhatsApp. But she actually posted her bruises on her face because she was driving electric scooter. And
Oh,
it's kind of funny, but because I really felt kind of no, maybe not. But then she's brave enough. She doesn't really want to put a filter. She wants to put it out there,
yeah.
and it's okay if some people don't like it, but she just shares what happened to her. And if some people judge that it was her husband that beat her up, that's
Oh,
fine. But
I wouldn't have even thought of
you
that.
know
Yes.
there you go. But as you said, people are mean, and it's really a struggle to cope with what other people think of us. But what they think of us is none of our business. We are not going to look back because we are not going that way.
Well,
That's
we
the
do.
direction, right?
Yes, we do have an advantage with that in that when when we go in a direction, if we can stay consistent with our messaging and who we are, we eventually reach an audience. And I think, I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about with authenticity, and that goes along absolutely with visual branding. For me, I'll talk about it as a corporate thing for a second because it's really obvious when it comes to people. But the goal with a brand, what a brand actually really is, it kind of means the personification of a business. So in the way that we think, let's pick somebody. BMW just was the one that popped into my head. I know, I don't know why. I know nothing
Mm.
about really the branding of BMW, but I do have a feeling about what the company is, what they stand for in terms of they're trying to design things for a certain audience. Their imagery has a very specific feel to it. And if BMW was a person, I think I know how that person would dress, how they would speak, what they would do when they came across things that were like competition. And if I pick something in a completely a different direction, I'm trying to think of something global, something. maybe you can help me on this one. Something global that's fun. A brand that we think
Hmm.
of and just like, oh, they are a fun brand.
How about at your wings, Red Bull?
Red Bull. Okay. Yeah. Red Bull,
Yeah.
a completely different personality, right? And so they're always promoting very extreme things. They're promoting things that kind of like living your best life, but taking it to the nth degree. Like you really know that you're living when you put yourself outside here, which is it's a very different message to what a BMW kind of message is. Like if you were going to take Red Bull and make them a person, you have an idea of what that person might look like, the clothes that they might wear, the restaurants that they might go to, the car they might drive. Interestingly, when I say car they might drive, like of course BMW, they're going to drive a BMW, but what all of these things look like. You know what hotels they would stay at, and when we try to define a brand in this way, we try to always put together visuals that fit the story for the brand. And so this is where we're going to bring it back to a person. Is we have a tendency to, even if we don't recognize it about ourselves, if we are self-branding, because we have fashion that we choose, we have a way that we do our hair, the clothes that we choose, the places that we go, we're actually self-branding all the time in imagery without thinking about it, with the things that we surround ourselves with. And I guess the difference would be whether we want to be intentional about the message that we're sending or haphazard. And I think when we tend, if we try to be a little more intentional, that's where we'll get consistency of message. And when you get consistency, that's how you get a stronger audience reaction. That's when you get your core audience. And as you find your core audience, that's when you're going to find the friendliness, when you're going to find your stronger community.
Beautiful. I'm speechless. But I just wanted to go back to our Women on It. Before the pandemic, we had a beautiful setting of lovely room at ICE Malta, which is a school for IT. And we talked about branding, how important it is to have a personal brand, specifically for female leaders, because we don't have enough of them and they do not promote themselves enough. So the aim
Yeah.
was to really get yourself visual, so visible.
Yes.
So I'm thinking, what would you say are the core what is this core strategy if you want to make yourself visible, or visual branding for
Uh,
females? What would you say is the core strategy?
wow. Well, let me go with tactics for a minute. Tactics being different to strategy. Like the strategy would be like the umbrella. The
Mhm.
tactics. I'm going the wrong way with this one. Tactics
Mm.
don't fit in the umbrella, but I'm going to go with tactics because there are a list of things, and hopefully when I come out of the end of this list of things, I was just like, so that would be the strategy. We'll see how this goes. Tactically, I'm going to go ahead and say that I believe it's probably a little harder to be a woman than it is a man when it comes to visuals, especially on the internet. And it's not because well, I can't say, I'm not a woman. I can't say whether it's actually harder, but I believe that I as a man, I'm probably going to receive less judgment. And it's totally not fair when we talk about the mean people and the way that things go wrong. I think the bar is set higher for women than it is for men. Not fair. I'm just bringing that up as an
Mhm.
observation. And so I believe being tactical about it is more important as a woman than it is a man. So things that I would do let me put it this way. If I was photographing a CEO or a brand leader that is a woman, in fact, most of my good friends are women, most of the people that I work for, I would say the majority are women. So when I think about, okay, if I'm going to position this person as the brand leader, one of the things that I want to be really careful about doing is retouching. Retouching is a really tough one because it's just like we're judgy as as an audience about how people look, and we want them to look a certain way, but we don't want them to look too much that way and not enough that way, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
We need we need to see somebody at a certain age to believe that they have strength and confidence. But one of the ways that we can do that is to make them is to take images in an ageless way. This would be something that I do in advertising a lot. And when I started, I didn't realize that that's what I was doing. But when you see, you can see a young model, young models these days, maybe 17, but you can't tell how old she is. She's maybe 25. Um, and I might be shooting somebody 35. I shoot them in an ageless way. We can't tell their age. Maybe they're 28 to 32. It seems like we want to move everything towards the middle, and somewhere between 30 and 45 is kind of like this power range for women at their strength. If I'm putting together the shot, we're going to be looking at wardrobe that kind of fits that age range, makeup that fits that age range, and again, in the not fair category, men with makeup. I mean, if it's on video, we just want to see guys not sweat. Women, we set the bar very much higher. It's surprising how much makeup is needed on camera to look like there's no makeup. Uh, our lights, hard light, sees through makeup in a way where it becomes invisible. And I think we're also conditioning. So when I say conditioning, like as an audience member, I'm conditioned to see women wearing heavier makeup, so I don't notice the makeup. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Okay. I I didn't want to be going so. I feel like I'm treading lightly because I don't want to be talking in a sexist way. I because this is not my opinion. What I'm trying to do is just trying to give a balance of just, well, like, this isn't fair, but this is how I see it, and how I kind of work within the bounds. So makeup wise, generally for imagery, yeah, absolutely go with a makeup artist, somebody who knows what they're doing. A lot of times for, say, fashion, uh, glossy makeup is
Mhm.
fashionable. It doesn't shoot particularly well. It shoots in kind of glossy can look really great and vibrant in real life, but on camera, especially in a still image, we're going to see glossy as kind of perspiring, perhaps. And again, one of those things, we don't want to see women perspiring in a leadership role, if that makes sense.
Mm.
That one, probably conditioning again. If it was working out in the gym, absolutely. Let's have that gloss going. But in a leadership role, another thing that we can all do, I'm going to do it right now. In fact, we have to talk to people on Zoom and on camera. When I'm talking about conditioning, we're all conditioned with our media on television, and where we place people on camera, in film or television, tells us where they are in the order of importance and authority. And so, if I'll take Star Wars for an example. If you see a picture of, 'cause I'm just going with Star Wars because everybody knows it, but I mean, it's really old now, so I'm kind of aging myself too. So we go to a scene where there's Yoda in it, and Yoda is telling Luke Skywalker, how to do something. Yoda is what? I don't know, like 2'6". I don't know. He's really, really tiny. But on camera, Yoda is going to be up here. So the camera is going to be like on the ground with Yoda saying something. I won't do my Yoda impression. I'll spare you.
Speak or no speak.
Yes. Good. So Yoda is going to be really tall in the frame. We know Yoda is not tall. When the camera cuts back to Luke, if Luke is learning something, Luke's going to be down here looking at Yoda. And so in the pecking order of authority, we know where Luke is. And what you will notice is as the film goes on and Luke becomes a Jedi, his head will go in the frame from here up to here. And then when he's on a close up, his head's going to be totally cut off at the top because he's now in a leadership role. The same thing, Darth Vader, he's going to be up here. And when he's talking to the unfortunate commanders on the other ships, which is really weird, they will actually be talking up to him from down here. Who put the camera there? Like, if I was going to talk to Darth Vader, I'm going to put the camera in a different spot so that he's not going to yell at me and, some kind of virtually strangle me. Anyway, that's part of a narrative that happens all the time. And we've been conditioned to see that. So when we're on Zoom and we're in photos and we want to be in a leadership role, go ahead and cut the top of your head off. We don't need to see the top of your head. This right here would tell, like, where I'm placing my head in the frame would say, Alec is in a leadership role here. And so anytime that you're putting your image out there in a way where you're taking that leadership role, that's where you want to place yourself. And so we will see that as an audience all the time, from clothing and makeup to where you place yourself in the camera. And so at all times, we're kind of personally branding ourselves in that way.
Even if you're struggling with imposter syndrome, make sure you don't show your nostrils. You just look at people. So here's a tricky one. And this is a question I had from somebody anonymous. What's more important, Alec? Is it story or the image?
Ooh, that's great. I go story every time. Story. That said, Norman Rockwell. Does that name mean anything to you? The painter? Is he international enough?
Not really.
Okay.
Not
okay.
really. Go ahead.
No problem. No, I grew up on Norman Rockwell paintings. I was fascinated by them as a kid.
I've got to look it up.
Okay. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and throw that out there for people to go ahead and look up Norman Rockwell. He used to paint the covers of a magazine called The Post, which predates me by 50 years, at least, I'm sure. But what was fascinating about him was that he was creating images that always told a story. And what was important about them, especially and I'm bringing it up, especially in terms of brand, is that they had a feel. So this is where those two merge. For me, story is always the most important for a brand, whether you're personally branding or you're corporately. But how you tell the story can be absolutely done through image. And the most important part of that story is how it feels. Very often, I'm going to pick on salespeople. If you're in a meeting with salespeople, the salespeople are always going to want to get the benefits of the product into the ad. And this is really difficult because, absolutely, we need to know the benefits, but there will be a tendency to, it's just like, okay, we need to check off this list of benefits. Like, it's the benefits that are going to sell the product. And it's product being, of course, the product or service, or, whether you're self-brand or corporate, all of these things are true. we always want to sell the benefits, but the buying audience, they're going to buy something based on a feeling. They're going to buy something based on a reaction. They generally won't have the reaction to the benefits. They're going to have a reaction to the feeling. So how can you create a feeling? And that's what brings me back to the Norman Rockwell paintings. If you look those up, there's going to be a bunch of those that it's like I can figure out the story. And interestingly, when we talk about imagery, if we were to say take one of those paintings that always has some kind of scene with a story, a background story in it, or generally has some kind of narrative, we'll call it. If you were to write out everything in the narrative, it's going to turn into a couple of page long narrative. Yet you can look at that and generally pick the whole vibe of the scene up in a tenth of a second, because we're very, very good at interpreting imagery and story from it. From that story, we will get a feeling. And very often, Norman Rockwell is going for things that pull at your heartstrings in some way. And when we can attach our vision, our visuals to a feeling, our audience is going to respond in a way that's so much stronger than benefit. So it's not like story goes over image. For me, the two of them go together, but define your story in a way that creates a feeling rather than creating a story that's a list of benefits.
So, in all that mix, where is the value coming in? I mean, there is a saying, and that's my favorite branding mentor, Cindy Gallop, who says, "You will never truly bond if you don't share the same values." Where do values come into that
Uh,
mix?
Awesome. You know what, when you were saying value, I was just like, oh, we're going to be going in the wrong direction here, because I was thinking of value as price. And for me, that falls into those benefits things where it's just like, you know what, when we're trying to message something away from somebody's objections, yeah, that's a great place for that. No, personal values. Yeah, absolutely. Where does that fit in? That's where those feelings are. And in terms of a brand, if a brand is an extension of a personality, the brand is the personification of a company. That's how we have to explain our values. And if we think about, we'll go back to Red Bull, because Red Bull goes kind of left to center on this one for me, and it values. I mean, I'm not going to get all of this right, but for me, when it comes to value, Red Bull has a problem for me personally. So I look at all the Red Bull videos. Man, I love watching the cycling videos. I think it would be fascinating to shoot. To film something like, I've never filmed anything like that. I shoot mainly for beauty brands. I like things pretty. That's what I do for a
Hmm.
living. I don't. I probably don't even know much about camera cranes. I mean, I know enough, but to operate them at the level that they shoot at, or mounting cameras onto cars in a way, like, those are skills that are not part of my skill set. I'd have to hire somebody who's a specialist in them. When I think of Red Bull, I'm fascinated by their videos. I'll watch the cycling ones. I'll find myself looking at the stunts. I do not drink Red Bull. And
Hmm.
so there's a disconnect there. Is the disconnect because Red Bull and I have different values, but I like their videos? I don't know. Perhaps it is. I'm not passionate about Red Bull as a drink in any way whatsoever. And when I look at people doing stunts like that, if I think of it against my personal values, it's just like, well, that's just nuts. Who would do that? So I'm fascinated, but it's like watching a train wreck. Not part of my values. So, maybe this goes along with that. Whereas you go with something like, what fits in with my,
Dove.
pardon me?
How about Dove?
Dove. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
fantastic example. So I don't work for Dove, but
Mm-hmm.
I look at their ads. Man, they are fantastic. They pull at my heartstrings. I know what. Okay, I don't actually know what they stand for. I imagine corporately they stand for profit, which
Hmm.
company doesn't. But if I were to give Dove a personality, it's just like there is a brand who cares about the people. They want everybody to be allowed to be authentically them and loved for who they are, no matter what package that they come in. And that's just a great core message. Again, I don't I'm not a Dove purchaser, but I absolutely could be. And
Hmm.
you know what? Maybe I am. Maybe, you know what? I think they have some shaving stuff. I shave my head. I might have had got Dove before, and but absolutely, if there was more Dove stuff, like that one definitely seems to be directed more to women than to men.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of that, it's not that it doesn't pull at my heartstrings. Like I watch that and I go, wow, that is fantastic. I love what that company's doing. And so I guess what we're getting at is it's really important. We can do it one of two ways. We can say, I want to appeal to this audience over here. And so I am going to write my copy. I'm going to find pictures that go along with that audience. Or we can do it the other way around. And this is what I said I would suggest is we all have a feeling about who our audience might be to start with. And eventually we get on and go, oh, that is a fantastic, that person is my core audience. At that point, we want to understand who they are. And if I can say this person is motivated by this, that's when I can find ways to target my story towards the motivation of that audience, and that's how I will earn them as a permanent audience member.
Earn their trust by sharing values and sharing love to things. So we are talking about big brands here, but did you notice? And it's a great example. But actually, before we go into my question, I think it's time to talk to Trixie Lopez because she's been waiting here
Okay.
patiently, and her question is: Great PhD. Hello, Alec. What is your
Hello.
thought on a good photograph is knowing where to stand? That's a tricky one.
um yes. uh is it okay? Yeah, it is a tricky one. part Absolutely, part of a great photograph is knowing where to stand, and that part would generally fall under the technical. So there's two types of good photographers in my world. There are photographers who are technically incredibly proficient, and they can make beautiful photographs technically, and they will be the ones who, if you go onto the internet and look what they're saying, they'll be talking about the bokeh or bokeh or the out of focus region and how the shadows and things are forming. That is part of lighting, knowing where to stand. We only ever photograph light. um,
Hmm.
for me, I think about photographing shadows often because the light tends to take care of itself. You can't get shadows without good light. So I'm always looking at the shadow detail because that's how we will get something. If I can turn one of these off. Let me just see. No, let's do that. Um, if I There we go. I'm backwards here. If you're talking about knowing where to stand, this is long side lighting. I've got the light on one side of my face, And I don't have a very round face. I've got kind of a pointy face. This kind of lighting would not be good for me. And so, knowing where to stand, I would go, I need to stand facing into the light and have the other side of my face fall into shadow. And so now, instead of having a pointy face, I've got more of a square face because I'm front lit, and then I've got a square side going on. All of these things, I'm bringing this up because that is great technical. I'm going to turn this light back on. That's great technical
Ta-da.
information. Will make a great photo, but how does that photo feel? And you can get photos that feel great without being technically proficient. And so that's where it's a difficult question. You will get likes for having a well-lit photograph, but you will get a zillion likes for having a well-lit photograph that feels great, that says something with a feeling. So I'm still going to go with story and feeling.
So here is your quotation. Cameras don't take pictures, they record light. It's great news for people with mobile cameras. You can take amazing images on mobile if you take it in the right light. I can tell you where to find amazing light. Tell us.
Where to find amazing light? Sure. You know what? One of the places we can find amazing light is well, I'll just give you some quick ones right off the bat. You got to take a selfie. Head to a window. Most people probably know that, but a small window, a narrow window, or a doorway. And the reason for finding great light there is in front of me, I've got two soft LEDs. It's not particularly great light, but for a computer screen, for me with glasses, it's a soft light and it works. Soft light is going to fill in our wrinkles. It's going to make me look younger, because I look 102 under a hard light. So finding that soft light, you head to a window or a doorway. If I'm in a pinch and I've got I do this a lot. If I've got to shoot a business leader and it's just like spur of the moment, we are heading for a doorway. If I put somebody in a doorway, they can lean up against the door, which it sounds weird. It's really hard to stand in open space for a photo for most people. I mean, we can do it with a selfie because that's just us, holding our phone. But if you got to stand in open space and somebody's taking a picture of you, it's kind of like you're standing out there naked. If I get to lean up against the doorway, that immediately just feels really comfortable. I have already relaxed myself. Now, behind us, because we're standing in a doorway, is very much darker. The light is falling off really fast. And so it gives me separation from the background for my subject when I'm photographing that. And there's a shape that happens. It's called this darkness that surrounds me from the doorway. And just about always there's some kind of, it could be an awning, there'll be some kind of roof. There's going to be something that comes out that blocks the light off the top of my head and pops light into my eyes, and there usually a bounce off the ground that gives me fill. And so if I were to light that up to get that kind of light in a studio, I'm going to need probably 4 lights to be able to light what you can do by just standing in a doorway. That's one of the easiest fixes for great light. If you need to take a picture of somebody or take one of yourself, the other thing you want to do is zoom. Use your longest lens. Even on an iPhone, if you're back at iPhone, I don't know, 8 or something, still zoom. When we zoom on the picture, it narrows our image width, and that changes the geometry of the face. And somewhere, if you're on a 35 millimeter camera, between 85 and 130, between 85 and 135 millimeters is kind of my favorite area to shoot a face. It flattens us a little bit, gives us good geometry. That would be, sorry, without being technical, if I were to compare that to the longest lens on my camera, on this one is like it's not nearly as long. I still want to zoom in and take the photo. And yes, I could zoom in after I take the photo, but if I do it when I'm doing the photo, I can frame it better. So give yourself like a little 2/3 zoom in, so you're stepping back further, and then you'll get that geometry right of a much longer lens as well. And that is how to take amazing photos with a mobile.
Yay! So we talked about how to take amazing ones, but how to prevent from taking failure photos, like for example, crouching like you're almost doing something else. I mean, I attended once a kind of a workshop when we talked about how not to take photos. And basically, I'm okay with my photos. Sometimes I don't look good, but this is me. Sometimes I don't
Yes.
look good, or
Yeah.
sometimes I'm at a different angle, and so on. So today I actually posted on my story on Instagram, on a woman on it. I posted a picture that I was taking a selfie with my eyes closed. Well, that happens. So that's part of my
Yes.
story. So, what would
Nice.
you say is a big no if you want to prevent from failures?
Oh man. Well, and that's the thing, right? What what makes something a failure? For me, a failure would be something that's not authentic. And so I'm going to cheat my way out of this one. Just because like what you said, taking a picture with your eyes closed, is that a failure? Uh,
Hmm.
Not if it's authentic. If you're trying to be real, you can be fun, you can be real, you can say all sorts of things. I think you're only a failure when you tell the story wrong, when you try to be something that you're not. If you like for me, over retouching is a failure every time over an unretouched photo. When I look when I look at a photo of somebody that's been, it's got a really heavy filter on it, um, it I get judgy. I become
Hmm.
judgmental about how they feel about themselves. I think, oh, that person doesn't like themselves very much. They want to hide who they are. I immediately have a feeling that this person is not a strong person. And so in that way, that would be a failure. And another one that I see. So if I every once in a while I will go and take photos of um, when I go into a company, their corporate board, or everybody in the room. There's just like, Alec, can you get us great photos for our about section? There's a good example. I've got two jobs there. One is to tell the story of the brand. So it's got to be a fit for the brand. The other is I want to take a picture that the person is happy with. And the way I do that is I always ask them to take a selfie of themselves. And they always like, well, why would I do that? Because it tells me how if I were to say, is your right side or your left side your best side? They probably wouldn't have an opinion. But if I say, take a selfie, they'll go like that. And it's just like, okay, so I know that I want my camera up here looking down. And I'm bringing this up because a failure would be, there are people who do that
Hmm.
on their social media. It says to me again that this is not a particularly confident person, and that would be a failure.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that answer, Alec. We've got In Love and in Pain. Hi, Bata and Alec. This topic is really interests me. That's lovely to hear
Well,
from
that's
you.
good to hear.
And yes, absolutely. And we've got Marianne Madera. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, Alec. Time to move my webcam.
Yeah, sorry about
I
that.
love that comment because Marianne, who is actually working with women on IT, is usually looking down at her screen, which is
Oh,
quite
yes.
tricky when you're doing the video, when you're like doing a Zoom or whatever stream you are using, and you have to look at the camera rather than at yourself.
Yes. So, well, here's a tip, just a super simple tip that can save some stuff. If you're on a laptop and it's on your desk, I got a desk in front of me right now. Put your laptop on some books so you can raise it up. Ideally, you want to be looking across at the person. it's natural for you to do that than for you to be looking down at somebody, and it's more natural for them. The other thing that I do is I don't maximize. So I'm on an iMac, so I've got a big screen in front of me. I don't maximize my screen. If I do that, I end up looking down here at the person.
Mm,
I go like 1/4. So my screen at the moment is like that big when I'm chatting with you, and I
mm.
keep you way up at the top near my camera, so that that's as close as I can get eye contact to. And I am seeing uh, some inventions coming out now. I believe in the near future we'll actually have cameras built in to our screens that are like 2/3 up our screen. Uh, that those are definitely in the pipeline. So our camera is going to move from the top of the screen. But one thing you can also do is mount your camera actually instead of if you've got an external webcam, mount it further down your screen. So if I were to do this, it would be like I'd be looking just off to the side of my camera, and you would get that kind of look on it there. And sometimes
Mm.
if I've got a meeting where I've got to make good eye contact with a person, that's how I will set that up.
Or what I sometimes do, I just look different directions all over the place, so I keep it alive. So, Alec,
Yes.
maybe not the best strategy for your visual identity, but this is my visual identity. I like to move, I like to
Yes.
shake things up, and this is the way I do.
Awesome. Awesome. Always be authentically yourself. Always. You will
There you
find an
go.
audience that way. Yes.
Alec, I think it's time to ask you a critical question of life lesson quote. How did it change it, and what would you say is your life lesson quote?
My life lesson quote. I can't get it into a small quote, but I have never been afraid to make the changes. When it comes to regret for me would be walking away from something too soon. I have never heard anybody say, "Oh man, I put way too much work into that. I'd have been way better off if I just hadn't tried." So sticking with it, you always go a little too long when you're going in a direction, but you never have regrets at the end of the day. Or if you do, like it is way rarer to have regret.
I love it. There is another, maybe not necessarily my life lesson quote, but it reminds me of Gary Vaynerchuk, who said, "One life, no regrets." You've got only one life, you shouldn't regret because no time wasted if you don't regret anything. And again, don't look back. You're not going that way. So,
Absolutely.
Alec, question that is always on our mind, on our positivity hack delivered. Let's imagine the pandemic is over and you can invite to breakfast any person in the world, to have private breakfast anywhere in the world. Who would you invite and where would you go to?
Okay. Um, as always, I color outside the lines, and I'm gonna color slightly outside the lines on this one. Got married 3 years ago, and my wife Sarah is just my dream person. And when we got married, rather than have a big wedding, we went to a villa in Mexico. Who was they're a big client of mine, and they've got a staff there on the water, and we took our family there. And had our parents, so it was just like our tight knit family, like you would have a big Christmas dinner, and those are the most special memories in my entire life of just having my family and Sarah's family and sitting down, uh, and in this incredible view on the Mexican Riviera, looking out over the water and having incredible conversations. And wow, do I miss that. My parents live in another country. We're all kind of scattered around the globe. So to man, if I could do a redo of anything in my life, because I'm not sure I'll ever get that chance again. That was so incredibly special. But this time I would change it to Tahiti. I really, really want to go to Tahiti.
Any particular place in Tahiti?
No, I've never been, but it just looks so incredibly beautiful that. But it was actually where we were supposed to go on our honeymoon, and then a monsoon came in, like literally the day before, and it was going to like torrentially rain for 10 days, and so we didn't end up going. And again, we went to Mexico because it was last minute. And it was just like, well, let's go there. At least we're going to see some sun. So there is a trip back to Tahiti for Sarah and I, and that would be Bora Bora on in one of those over the water bungalows. That that is somewhere in the future again.
Fingers crossed for that, Alec. Well,
Oh,
speaking
thank you.
about your wife, I know that she's having quite an exciting project, and you promised that
Yes,
you will pass on the good word about us, and
absolutely, I
hopefully we
will.
will have her on our show. So,
Oh,
can you
it
tell
should be
us
fantastic.
what she's doing?
So, my wife Sarah, her name's Sarah Jelks. She runs a women's international fitness company. It's an online one, and man, if there's somebody that is an expert about leading community, wow, amazing. I mean, she spends a gazillion hours doing it, but I don't know anybody who has actually a more successful online community than hers with healthy role models. Her return rate for people who are in the workout program is over 80%. And in the workout world, it's usually, like 20% stick with it, 80% fall off. She's got an over 80% return rate and a 20% fall off. And it really, well, I'd like to think it's due to visual branding, but absolutely not. The 20% new people that come in, that's maybe visual branding. The 80% that stick with it, it's just like the power of community, and that she's able to do that online and lead that internationally to thousands of women amazes me every day.
The power of community, women on IT, hug the future is also here. So, and when we are talking about romantic stories, I have to share my personal story because I remember when I started dating my husband. Sorry for this privacy now
No, this is
exposed.
this is good.
Yes, starts good. Well, he took me for my birthday to Paris, and he couldn't understand why I was kind of disappointed. Because if I had a choice, I would go to Rome. So there is a part of visual identity or visual branding of a city because in my mind, Rome is more romantic, more kind of free spirit than Paris. So this is my kind of background story of how I feel about certain places, or
Yep.
whether it's Tahiti or wherever in the world there we are kind of encapsulated with visual branding everywhere, whether it's for person, for cities, for countries, it's everywhere. So as we are heading to the end of our show, Alec, are you working on any exciting new project right now?
I well, why? Yes, I am. Thank you for leading into that. So, timing wise, it was like I had a crystal ball somehow. Except my crystal ball, if I'd have got it right, I'd have been a little quicker. Uh, I always wanted to go back to school, so uh, several years ago, I went back to school while I still lived in the U.S. and I finished my master's at Harvard in digital media design. And at the time, I wanted to actually write the book on visual branding. And as it turned out, with going there, they were just like, Alec, why don't you create, an online version of your book? Books are so old. I still want to do a book, by the way.
Hmm.
And so my area of concentration was in online course design and educational design within digital media. And so I created kind of the quintessential visual branding course called Your Visual Brand. So that's my website, yourvisualbrand.com. And my goal with that was to take small business or solopreneurs, that are self-branding, all the way up to mid-sized brands, and give them the playbook, the rule book that we follow when we're working with the big brands. And initially, when I started out, I had this idea that we were going to do I was going to sit down and talk for 20 minutes, and my teacher's like, no, Alec, you can't do that. People don't have time for that. They're adults. They have lives. You got 5 minutes. So it was a serious challenge. So managed to turn it into 5 to 7 minute lessons a day for 5 weeks. And then because of COVID still going on, and I can't fly internationally for work still, I live on Vancouver Island. I'm actually including sit downs on Zoom with me to anybody who signs up for the course, and we will go through your visual branding from your online portfolio, your website, all the way to a checkout. Whatever works for you. My time is yours along with the course.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Alec. It's been a pleasure. And I have to say that I have to mention the great visual branding expert Confucius, even though he didn't know anything about modern photography, digital photography, or digital branding. Tell people and they may forget, show them, they may remember, but involve them and they will understand. So, definitely, your course is something our community will be looking forward to. I would love to share the link with our audience. So, if you could pass it on to Racy, we will be posting
Absolutely.
it shortly. And that's it from episode 33 of Positivity Hack Delivered. Thanks to our guest Alec Watson, speaking to us from far away, not in Tahiti yet. To stay updated and ensure you never miss a Positivity Hack Delivered, follow Women on IT and turn on notifications to be alerted once a video has been released. When you focus on the positives get more positive. As always, our positivity quote comes from positive thinking only and goes, look for something positive in each day, even if some days you have to look a little bit harder. Today is your day to hack the future. Hack the positivity you want. Thank you.